Welcome to my channel, a list that bring your story about the love of a mafia boss. Now let's listen.
Block 1. The rain pounded against my skin like tiny needles, each droplet a fresh reminder of how thoroughly my day had collapsed. My soaked cotton blouse clung to my trembling frame as I stumbled through the unfamiliar neighborhood, one hand clutching my phone, dead, of course, and the other pressed against the stitch in my side. The streetlights cast sickly yellow pools onto the glistening pavement, barely illuminating the elegant townhouses that lined this part of Boston I'd never ventured into before. 20 minutes ago, my car had sputtered and died on a side street 3 blocks back. No warning, just a series of alarming clanks followed by silence. No Uber available, no charge in my phone, no umbrella, no hope. I hugged myself tighter as another gust of wind drove the rain sideways. My teeth chattered uncontrollably. I needed help. A phone, shelter, anything. The neighborhood screamed money, old money, with its manicured hedges and wrought iron fences. People with security systems and doormen, and probably a deep suspicion of drowned rats like me appearing on their doorsteps after midnight. But I was desperate. I turned toward the nearest townhouse. A massive 4-story brownstone with darkened windows save for a faint light, glimmering from what appeared to be the ground floor. The building stood slightly apart from its neighbors, with a small courtyard protected by an ornate gate that, miraculously, stood ajar. Stone lions guarded the short path to heavy double doors of dark polished wood. Something about the place, its isolation perhaps, or the way the shadows seemed to pool more deeply around it, should have warned me, but the cold and exhaustion had numbed my instincts along with my fingers. I pushed through the gate, wincing at its soft creak, and hurried up the steps. Only when I stood beneath the shelter of the portico did I realize how violently I was shaking. Water streamed from my hair, forming a puddle at my feet. I raised my hand to knock, then hesitated. What kind of person would answer their door to a stranger at this hour? What kind would I be disturbing? The same kind who might have a phone I could use, I reminded myself. The kind who might take pity on someone clearly in trouble. Drawing a deep breath, I rapped my knuckles against the wood. 3 quick, desperate taps. Silence. I counted to 30 in my head, then knocked again, louder this time. The door swung open with such sudden smoothness that I stumbled back a step. Warm air brushed against my face, carrying with it the sense of leather, expensive cologne, and something else. Something sharp and metallic that I couldn't identify. But it was the man filling the doorway that froze the breath in my lungs. He wasn't particularly tall, perhaps 6 feet, but something about him consumed the space around him. Broad shoulders stretched the fabric of what I instantly recognized as a bespoke suit, charcoal gray and impeccably tailored. His dark hair was swept back from a face that belonged on ancient Roman coins, all clean lines and perfect angles, with cheekbones that could cut glass and a mouth set in a firm, unreadable line. But it was his eyes that truly trapped me. Dark as wet asphalt, watchful, assessing, dangerous. Those eyes studied me with such intensity that I felt like a butterfly pinned to a board. One of his hands rested against the doorframe. Strong fingers, a heavy gold signet ring, immaculate nails. The other hand was hidden from view, and somehow that small detail sent a chill through me that had nothing to do with my wet clothes. Behind him, the entryway gleamed with marble floors and soft lighting, offering warmth and shelter that suddenly seemed far more complicated than it had moments ago. "I'm so sorry to bother you," I stammered, my voice embarrassingly thin. "My car broke down a few blocks away and my phone is dead, and I just need to call for help." "I can go somewhere else if—" "Come in." His voice was quiet, but carried such natural authority that I found myself stepping forward before I'd consciously decided to move. Deep and smooth like aged whiskey, with the barest hint of an accent I couldn't place. He stepped aside, a minimal movement that nonetheless conveyed permission to enter his domain. As I crossed the threshold, I became acutely aware of how I must appear. Hair plastered to my skull, makeup surely streaked down my cheeks, clothes clinging unflatteringly to every curve. "Thank you," I managed, hugging myself tighter as I dripped onto his immaculate floor. "I just need to make a quick call, and I'll be out of your way." His only response was to close the door behind me with a soft click that sounded oddly final. I watched, transfixed, as he turned a heavy deadbolt, then another, then engaged a security system on a panel beside the door. The soft beep of the alarm setting seemed to echo in the silent foyer. He turned back to me, those dark eyes moving from my face down to my feet and back up again in a single fluid assessment, not leering, not exactly, but somehow more intrusive than if he had been. I had the distinct impression of being catalogued, evaluated, perhaps even priced. "You're shivering." It wasn't a question, but a flat statement of fact. Before I could respond, he gestured toward a doorway to my right. "In there. There's a fire." I hesitated, suddenly uncertain. The warm, dry room he indicated was undeniably tempting. But something deep in my brain, some primitive survival instinct, was beginning to stir. This man was a stranger. I was alone. I was vulnerable, and something about him radiated power and danger in equal measure. But the alternative was to go back into the storm, with no phone, no car, and no clear destination. At least here there was light and warmth, and the promise of help. So I nodded and moved in the direction he'd indicated, conscious of him following a few steps behind me. Not too close, but close enough that I could feel his presence like a weight between my shoulder blades. The room was a study straight out of an old film. Mahogany bookshelves lining the walls, a massive desk dominating one corner, leather furniture arranged before a fireplace where flames danced behind a glass screen. The air smelled of cedar, leather, and the subtle cologne I'd noticed earlier. It was masculine without being overwhelming, elegant without being showy, but what caught my eye was what seemed out of place. A half-empty tumbler of amber liquid on a side table, papers spread across the desk, a laptop open and glowing. I'd interrupted him in the middle of something. "Sir, I really just need to use a phone. I don't want to impose." "Sit." Again, that quiet command that seemed to bypass my brain and connect directly to my limbs. I sank onto the edge of a leather armchair, perching there like a bird ready to take flight. Up close, the fire's heat was almost painful against my chilled skin. He remained standing, watching me with that same unreadable expression. Then, without warning, he moved to a cabinet against the wall, opened it, and withdrew a folded piece of fabric. A blanket, I realized, as he shook it open with a practiced flick of his wrists. Before I could protest, he had draped it around my shoulders, his movements efficient and impersonal, yet somehow intimate in their presumption. "Thank you," I murmured, pulling the soft cashmere tighter around me. Our fingers had brushed during the exchange, his warm and dry, mine cold and clammy. The brief contact had sent an unexpected jolt up my arm. He stepped back, maintaining a careful distance that somehow emphasized rather than diminished his physical presence. "Your name?" Again, not a question. "Emma," I said, then swallowed hard. "Emma Reeves." He nodded once, accepting this information without offering anything in return. Instead, he moved to the desk, picked up what I now saw was a smartphone in a sleek black case, and extended it toward me. "Call whoever you need." I reached for the phone, but as my fingers closed around it, he didn't immediately release his hold. Our eyes met over the small device that connected us, and something shifted in his expression. A subtle tightening around the eyes, a barely perceptible tilt of the head. "Who were you trying to reach, Emma Reeves?" he asked, his voice softer now, almost intimate. My name in his mouth somehow transformed into something new and unfamiliar. I faltered, suddenly uncertain. Who was I trying to call? My roommate was out of town. My ex wouldn't answer. My parents lived 3 states away. The reality of my isolation struck me anew, and I felt a flush of embarrassment heat my cheeks. A tow company, I suppose, and maybe a cab. His eyebrow arched slightly. At this hour? In this weather? He finally released the phone, letting his hand fall to his side. Neither will come for hours, if at all. He was right, of course. I stared down at the phone, its screen reflecting my distressed face back at me. When I looked up again, he had moved to a sideboard where crystal decanters caught and fractured the firelight. Drink? He was already pouring something dark into a tumbler, not waiting for my response. I shouldn't... To warm you. He turned, glass extended. Another command disguised as an offer. I took it, our fingers brushing again. This time I was prepared for the jolt, but it came anyway. The liquid inside was a rich amber, and when I raised it to my lips, the scent of expensive whiskey filled my nostrils. I took a small sip, felt it burn a path down my throat and bloom warm in my stomach. He watched me drink with an intensity that made me self-conscious. When he finally spoke again, his words caught me off guard. "You knocked on the wrong door, Emma Reeves." My hand tightened around the glass. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to disturb you. If you'd prefer I leave, that's not what I said." He moved to the chair opposite mine, lowering himself into it with a fluid grace that belied his solid frame. The firelight cast half his face in shadow, sharpening already severe angles. "You're not in a neighborhood where people knock on doors past midnight. You're not dressed for this weather. Your car breaking down here is improbable. Are you accusing me of something?" I set the glass down with a sharp click, indignation momentarily overriding my unease. "I'm observing," he corrected, his tone mild but his eyes anything but. "Just as I observe that your left ring finger shows the tan line of a recently removed wedding band, that the watch on your wrist is worth more than most people's monthly salary, that your accent shifts when you're nervous, suggesting you've worked to change it." He leaned forward slightly, those dark eyes never leaving mine. "And that you're afraid right now, but not of me specifically. Not yet." My mouth had gone dry despite the whiskey. Everything he said was true, and that terrified me more than his scrutiny. I'd spent years carefully constructing the person I presented to the world, and this stranger had dismantled my facade in minutes. "Who are you?" I whispered. The corner of his mouth lifted in what might generously be called a smile. "The owner of the door you knocked on." A non-answer that sent another chill through me despite the fire's heat. I needed to leave, needed to get away from this man and his too perceptive eyes, and the growing sense that I'd made a terrible mistake. But as I shifted my weight, preparing to stand, a sudden commotion outside the study froze me in place. Heavy footsteps approached. A sharp knock. A door opening somewhere beyond the study. Male voices. Low, urgent, respectful. "Mr. Castellano." The voice was deferential but tense. "There's a situation that requires your attention." My host, Mr. Castellano apparently, didn't turn toward the voice. Instead, his eyes remained fixed on mine, something calculating flickering in their depths. "Wait," he said, and for a moment I thought he was speaking to me. Then he rose smoothly and moved toward the study door, stepping outside and pulling it nearly closed behind him. I couldn't make out the words that followed, just the low murmur of male voices, his commanding, the others deferential. Something about the exchange raised the hair on my arms. This wasn't a normal late-night conversation. These weren't normal household staff or family members. My gaze darted around the room, searching for clues about the man who'd let me into his home. The desk was too far away to read the papers spread across it. The bookshelves held leather-bound volumes with gilded spines but no personal photos. Nothing to indicate who Mr. Castellano was, beyond a man of obvious wealth and taste. Except, my eyes caught on something gleaming beneath the edge of a newspaper on the side table. I leaned slightly, trying to see without being obvious about it. Metal, dark. The unmistakable shape of a handgun. My heart stuttered in my chest. Normal people didn't leave guns casually displayed on their side tables. Normal people didn't have staff arriving with situations past midnight. Normal people didn't dissect strangers with their eyes the way Mr. Castellano had done to me. I'd made a catastrophic error in judgment. And as the study door swung open again, and Mr. Castellano stepped back inside, I realized I might not have the opportunity to correct it. Because the expression on his face had changed, hardened into something cold and assessing. "It seems," he said, voice deceptively soft, "that your car is not where you claimed it broke down." He moved toward me with deliberate steps. "In fact, there's no abandoned vehicle anywhere within 5 blocks of here." My mouth opened, but no sound emerged. How did he know that? Who had he sent to check? Why would he even bother? "Which leads me to wonder," he continued, coming to a stop directly in front of my chair. "Why Emma Reeves? if that is indeed your name, would knock on my door specifically, on this particular night. I shook my head, confusion and fear tangling my thoughts. I don't understand. I told you the truth. My car... Let me be clear. He crouched down, bringing his face level with mine, close enough that I could see flecks of amber in his dark eyes. I don't believe in coincidences. I don't believe in bad luck, and I don't believe you picked my home at random. But I did, I protested, my voice barely a whisper. I had no idea who lived here. I just needed help. His expression didn't change, but something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Then you have made a very serious mistake. He straightened, towering over me once more. Because the help you find here may not be the kind you were seeking. The blanket suddenly felt like a trap, confining my movements. I struggled to my feet, letting it fall to the floor between us. I should go. No. The single word fell like a stone between us. I'm afraid that's no longer an option, Emma Reeves. Outside, thunder rumbled, closer now. The rain beat against the windows with renewed fury, and I stood trembling before a man who I was beginning to suspect was far more dangerous than the storm. My innocent error, a simple knock on the wrong door, had led me somewhere I never intended to go. And as Mr. Castellano studied me with those depthless eyes, I realized with bone-deep certainty that leaving would not be as simple as walking back into the rain. I had entered his world, and something told me he had no intention of letting me leave it. Please, I said, hating the tremor in my voice. There's been a misunderstanding. I really did have car trouble. Maybe I got the location wrong, or maybe someone already towed it, but... Sit down, Emma. The command was quiet, but carried a weight that pressed against my chest. When I remained standing, something darkened in his expression. Please. That single word, somehow more threatening than a shout, pushed me back into the chair. My hands gripped the leather armrest as he circled behind me, his footsteps nearly silent on the expensive carpet. I stared straight ahead, afraid to turn and track his movements, even more afraid not to. Every nerve ending in my body seemed to vibrate with awareness of his presence. I have a theory, he said, his voice coming from directly behind me now. Would you like to hear it? I nodded stiffly, not trusting my voice. You're running from something, or someone. His words brushed against my ear as he leaned closer. The missing wedding ring, the expensive watch you keep touching as if checking it's still there, the way you flinch at sudden sounds. He moved into my field of vision again, leaning against the desk with casual elegance that belied the tension radiating from him. The question is, what exactly brought you to my door tonight? Chance? Or design? Chance, I whispered. Pure bad luck. A humorless smile curved his lips. In my experience, there's no such thing as luck, only opportunities and threats, correctly or incorrectly identified. He reached for his own drink, abandoned earlier, and took a deliberate sip before setting it down with precision. So, which are you, Emma Reeves? Opportunity or threat? Before I could answer, a soft knock interrupted us. The door opened just enough to admit a mountain of a man, tall, broad-shouldered, with close-cropped blonde hair and a face that seemed carved from stone. His eyes flicked to me briefly before focusing on Castellano. The car's been located, sir. 2 blocks east, as you suspected. His voice was surprisingly soft for a man his size. Keys still in the ignition. Registration matches the name she gave. The engine's been tampered with. Relief washed through me. See, I was telling the truth. Castellano exchanged a look with the other man that I couldn't interpret. Thank you, Victor. Have it brought to the garage, and double the patrols tonight. Victor nodded once and disappeared, closing the door silently behind him. It seems, Castellano said, turning back to me, that your story checks out. Partially. Partially? He moved closer, forcing me to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Someone deliberately disabled your vehicle, Emma. The question is, did they follow you here? Or were you led here intentionally? My mind struggled to process his words. Someone had tampered with my car? That couldn't be right. Unless... A cold knot formed in my stomach as pieces began falling into place. The strange calls I'd been receiving, the sense of being watched for weeks now. The break-in at my apartment that police had dismissed as routine. I don't know, I admitted, my voice small. I felt like someone's been following me. But I thought I was being paranoid. Something shifted in Castellano's expression. Not softening exactly, but a subtle recalibration. He studied me for a long moment, then made a decision I could see register in his eyes before he spoke. You don't know who I am, do you? I shook my head. Interesting. He moved to a panel in the wall that I hadn't noticed before, pressed his palm against it, and revealed a hidden safe. From it, he withdrew a small electronic device about the size of a credit card. Stand up, please. When I hesitated, he added, I'm not going to hurt you, but I need to ensure you're not carrying any listening devices or trackers. You think I'm wired? The absurdity of it almost made me laugh despite my fear. I think someone went to considerable trouble to disable your car in this particular location, he replied evenly. And I'd be a fool not to verify you're not part of that plan. Reluctantly, I stood. He approached with the device in hand, and my breath caught as he began moving it slowly around my body, never touching me, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. He circled me methodically, the device emitting occasional soft beeps that made my heart stutter. When he reached my watch, the device beeped more insistently. Castellano's eyes met mine. Take it off. My hand instinctively covered the watch, the last gift from my grandmother, the one precious thing I'd managed to keep when my life imploded. It's just a watch. Then you won't mind removing it. His tone left no room for argument. With trembling fingers, I unclasped it and held it out. He took it, examined the face and band carefully, then turned it over. His thumb pressed against something on the back panel, and with surgical precision, he extracted a tiny black disc no larger than a pinhead. My blood turned to ice. That's not possible. I've had this watch for years. And when was the last time you let it out of your possession? He asked, dropping the disc into a crystal ashtray and crushing it beneath a heavy silver lighter. My mind raced back. The watch had stopped working 2 weeks ago. I'd taken it to a jeweler recommended by David's assistant, my soon-to-be ex-husband's assistant. Oh, God, I breathed, understanding dawning with sickening clarity. Castellano watched the realization cross my face. Your husband? Almost ex-husband, I corrected automatically. We're in the middle of a divorce. It's complicated. Divorces usually are. He placed my watch on the desk, now harmless. Especially when they involve men who would plant tracking devices on their wives. The room suddenly seemed too small, too warm. I need to leave. If he tracked me here, he already knows you're here. That's the point. Castellano's voice remained calm, but something dangerous flashed in his eyes. The question is why he wanted you to come to me specifically. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't even know who you are. My voice rose with panic. David is a financial advisor. He manages portfolios for wealthy clients. He doesn't know people like me, Castellano supplied, a hint of dark amusement coloring his tone. And what kind of person do you think I am, Emma? I swallowed hard. The gun on the side table, the security, the way his men spoke to him, the hidden safe, the casual way he'd found and destroyed a tracking device that I hadn't even known existed. Someone important, I said carefully. Someone powerful. Someone dangerous. He inclined his head slightly, acknowledging the assessment without confirming or denying it. And your husband? What kind of man is he? Controlling. Jealous. The words tumbled out before I could stop them. But he's never been violent, not physically at least. There are many forms of violence. Castellano studied me with those penetrating eyes. Tell me about the divorce. I hesitated. Why was I even considering sharing my personal problems with this stranger? And yet, something told me that withholding information would be more dangerous than revealing it. It's been dragging on for 8 months. David keeps finding ways to delay the proceedings, claiming I'm hiding assets or that various properties can't be properly valued yet. I ran a hand through my still damp hair. I just want out, but he can't stand losing control. And what does he stand to lose beyond that control? I laughed bitterly. About $30 million, half his net worth, according to the prenup he thought would never be enforced. Understanding dawned in Castellano's eyes. Ah, now we're getting somewhere. He moved to the window, pulling back the heavy curtain just enough to peer out into the storm. Your husband tracks you to my home on a night when I'm known to be alone. You arrive distressed, vulnerable, claiming to need help. An innocent damsel in distress. He turned back to me, his expression hardening. It's an elegant setup, I'll admit. Set up for what? I demanded, frustration finally overriding my fear. I still don't understand what's happening. Your husband is not merely a financial advisor, Emma. Castellano's voice was soft, but implacable. David Reeves launders money for several criminal organizations, including rivals of mine. He's also skimmed considerable amounts from his clients over the years, including $7 million from my personal account 6 months ago. The floor seemed to drop away beneath me. That can't be true. I've been building a case against him, quietly, methodically. He must have realized he was under scrutiny. Castellano's eyes never left mine. And now, suddenly, his wife appears at my door. What an interesting coincidence. My head spun with implications I couldn't fully grasp. You think he sent me here? As what? Bait? A distraction? Or as a weapon? Castellano said coldly. A beautiful woman, seemingly in danger. A man with a reputation to protect. It could be used to compromise me in numerous ways. I'm not part of any plot, I insisted, rising from the chair on unsteady legs. I didn't even know who you were until 5 minutes ago. He watched me with that unnervingly steady gaze. Perhaps. Or perhaps you're an exceptional actress. Before I could respond, another knock came at the door, sharper this time, more urgent. Castellano called out permission to enter, and Victor reappeared, his expression grim. Sir, there's movement at the perimeter. Multiple vehicles approaching from the east. Castellano's posture changed subtly, a coiling of energy, a readiness for action. How many? 3 SUVs, blacked out, no plates visible. A muscle ticked in Castellano's jaw. Activate Protocol 7, full lockdown. His eyes cut to me, reassessing. And get Ms. Reeves to the panic room, now. Victor nodded once and moved toward me, his massive hand closing gently, but firmly around my upper arm. Wait, I protested, panic rising. What's happening? Who's coming? Castellano was already moving toward the desk, withdrawing the gun I'd glimpsed earlier, and checking its magazine with practiced efficiency. It seems your husband has decided to collect you personally. His eyes met mine, cold and assessing. Unless, of course, this is exactly what you planned. I didn't, I whispered, the truth of my situation finally crashing down on me with full force. I swear I didn't know. Something in my face must have convinced him, because his expression shifted minutely. Go with Victor. Do exactly as he says. If you value your life, don't try anything stupid. As Victor guided me firmly toward a door concealed behind a bookshelf, I cast one last glance over my shoulder. Castellano stood framed against the firelight, gun in hand, radiating lethal focus. Our eyes met briefly, and I saw something unexpected flash across his face, a fierce, possessive determination that sent a shiver up my spine. I'd knocked on the wrong door tonight, and now I was caught between a husband I no longer recognized and a dangerous man who might not trust me enough to protect me. The panic room was nothing like I'd imagined. Instead of a cramped utilitarian space, it was a fully furnished apartment tucked away beneath Castellano's home. Victor guided me through a series of corridors that sloped gently downward before opening into a spacious living area with modern furnishings, recessed lighting, and, most surprisingly, what appeared to be windows displaying a night cityscape. Their screens, Victor said, noticing my confusion. Live feed from cameras around the property, plus some pre-recorded views to make it feel less confined. He moved to a sleek control panel on the wall, his fingers dancing across a touchscreen. Multiple camera feeds appeared, showing different angles of the brownstone and surrounding streets. I could see the 3 black SUVs Victor had mentioned, now parked haphazardly in front of the gate. Men in dark clothing poured out, their movements precise and coordinated. Are those David's men? My voice sounded strange to my own ears, thin and distant. Victor's expression remained neutral. Stay here. The room is secure. There are supplies in the kitchen, bathroom through there. He pointed toward a doorway. Do not attempt to leave or communicate with anyone. The system will alert you when it's safe. Before I could ask any of the questions crowding my throat, he was gone. The door sealing behind him with a soft pneumatic hiss, followed by the unmistakable sound of multiple locks engaging. Alone now, I sank onto a leather sofa, my legs finally giving out. My mind raced, trying to process everything that had happened in the last hour. David, my controlling but seemingly legitimate financier husband, was actually laundering money for criminals and had stolen from Castellano? It seemed impossible, yet it explained so much. The unexplained late nights, the secretive phone calls, the offshore accounts I'd discovered during divorce proceedings that his lawyers claimed were perfectly legal tax shelters. And now men with guns were surrounding the house because... what? Because I'd accidentally ended up at the home of someone David had stolen from? The coincidence seemed too great. Had the tracking device in my watch been steering me here all along? Had my car been sabotaged specifically to break down near Castellano's home? But why would David want me to encounter a man he'd stolen from? It made no sense. Unless... A chilling thought struck me. What if David wasn't trying to retrieve me at all? What if I was merely bait, a way to confirm Castellano was home and vulnerable? What if this was about eliminating a threat to David's criminal activities? And I had unwittingly played a part. I moved to the wall of screens, searching the camera feeds for any sign of Castellano. Most showed exterior views, men in tactical gear establishing positions around the property, a garden area now empty save for the falling rain, the street beyond the gate where more vehicles were arriving. One feed, labeled Study, showed the room I'd just left. Castellano stood at his desk, now flanked by 4 men including Victor. They were armed but calm, reviewing what appeared to be a floor plan spread across the desk. Castellano's posture revealed no tension, just focused readiness. He spoke, his lips moving soundlessly on the camera feed, and the others nodded. My finger hovered over the screen. Was there audio? Some way to hear what they were saying. Before I could explore further, movement on another screen caught my eye. A feed labeled East Entrance. A familiar figure stepped into view, flanked by 2 larger men in suits. David. My breath caught. Even through the grainy security footage, I could see he wore the same cold, calculated expression I'd come to fear during our worst arguments. A look that suggested he was several moves ahead and merely waiting for you to realize you'd already lost. He approached the side entrance with the confidence of someone who expected to be admitted. When he reached the door, he looked directly up at the camera, a thin smile playing at his lips. He raised his empty hands, showing he was unarmed, then made a gesture I couldn't interpret. The camera feed abruptly cut out, switching to static. "No," I whispered, frantically tapping the screen. "No, no, no." One by one, the exterior camera feeds began failing, each replaced by the same snowy static. Only the interior feeds remained active. The study, the main hall, the kitchen, all still showing Castellano's men in defensive positions. My heart hammered against my ribs. Whatever David was planning, it was happening now. And I was trapped underground, helpless to warn anyone, with no way of knowing if the man who'd sheltered me believed I was part of the trap closing around him. I paced the room, searching for any means of communication, any way to help. The control panel seemed locked to my touch, refusing to respond to my increasingly desperate taps. There were no phones visible, no computers, nothing I could use to send a warning. On the remaining screens, I watched as Castellano dispatched his men to various positions throughout the house. He remained in the study, now alone, seemingly calm as he poured himself a drink and sat behind his desk, the gun placed within easy reach. Was this a normal response to being surrounded? He looked almost expectant, as if he'd been waiting for this confrontation. A new feed suddenly activated on the wall of screens, the front entry hall. The heavy wooden doors I'd entered through earlier swung open, and David stepped inside, still flanked by his 2 guards. He was permitted entry by 2 of Castellano's men, who relieved David's guards of their weapons, but allowed them to remain at his side. David looked different than when I'd last seen him 3 weeks ago during a tense meeting with our divorce attorneys. His normally impeccable appearance had an edge of desperation now. His bespoke suit slightly rumpled, his usually perfect hair showing signs of hasty styling, His face leaner and harder, but his eyes, those pale blue eyes that had once captivated me, still held the same cold calculation I'd grown to fear. I watched, breath held, as David was escorted through the house toward the study. When the door opened, Castellano didn't rise from his seat or show any reaction at all. He merely watched as David entered, his face an unreadable mask. "Castellano," David said, his voice tinny through whatever microphone was capturing the sound. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. Your theatrical entrance left me little choice," Castellano replied, his voice deceptively calm. "I count 15 of your men surrounding my home. An impressive show of force for a financial advisor." David smiled tightly. "A necessary precaution when meeting with a man of your reputation. I assume my wife is here?" My blood ran cold at his proprietary tone. "Ex-wife," I wanted to scream. "Almost ex-wife." Castellano's expression didn't change. "Why would you assume that? Don't insult my intelligence." David's smile fell away. "I tracked her here. I know she's in the building." Yes, the tracking device." Castellano picked up something small from his desk, my watch, and turned it over in his hands. "Clever. Though planting it during a jewelry repair lacks imagination." David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Where is she?" "Safe." Castellano set the watch down with deliberate care. "Unlike your men outside, who will find themselves in an increasingly problematic situation the longer they remain on my property. They're merely insurance, to ensure this conversation remains civil." David loosened his tie slightly. "I've come to negotiate. For your wife?" Castellano raised an eyebrow. "Or for your life?" Something dangerous flashed across David's face, a glimpse of the rage I knew he kept carefully controlled. "For resolution of our misunderstanding." "You stealing $7 million from me was not a misunderstanding, Reeves. It was a death wish." Castellano's voice remained conversational, as if discussing a minor business matter. "The only reason you're still breathing is because I've been curious about your endgame." David forced another smile. "I prefer to think of it as borrowing with intent to repay, with interest. And yet you haven't. Instead, you've spent months hiding behind lawyers and offshore accounts." Castellano leaned forward slightly. "And now you track your estranged wife to my door on a night when my security protocols are at their highest. One might think you're adding suicidal to your list of character flaws." My hands pressed against the screen, as if I could somehow reach through it and understand what was happening. This confrontation felt scripted somehow, as if both men were following predetermined roles while the real action was happening elsewhere. "I didn't know she would come here tonight," David said, a hint of genuine frustration breaking through his composure. "That was unexpected. And yet you followed her immediately, with enough men to start a small war." Castellano's tone made it clear he didn't believe David for a second. "Try again." David hesitated, then seemed to reach a decision. "Fine. Cards on the table. I know you've been building a case against me. I know you've accessed my records, tracked my transactions, even flipped some of my associates." He straightened his shoulders. "I came to offer you a deal. I'm listening." Castellano's face betrayed nothing. "Triple your money back. 21 million, plus information on the Vitaliev organization that would be extremely valuable to your operations." Castellano's expression remained unchanged, but I saw his finger tap once against the desk, a tell I'd noticed earlier when he was assessing my story. He was intrigued but suspicious. "And in exchange, you destroy the evidence you've gathered against me. You call off your investigation, and..." David paused. "You give me back my wife." Fury surged through me at his presumption, at being treated like property to be traded. On screen, Castellano's eyes narrowed fractionally. "You speak of her as if she's a possession," he observed, "not a particularly enlightened view in these modern times." "Emma is my wife," David said, his voice hardening. "Whatever she's told you about our marriage or our divorce is a manipulation. She's unstable, Castellano. Has been since her father's death. Invents conspiracies, makes accusations. Her therapists are quite concerned." I gasped aloud, rage and disbelief choking me. the audacity of his lies, the same gaslighting techniques he'd used throughout our marriage, now deployed to a dangerous stranger. Castellano's expression remained neutral, but his eyes had darkened. Interesting theory. It doesn't explain the tracking device, however. A precaution. For her own protection. David waved a hand dismissively. She's attempted self-harm before, another lie. So blatant it made me dizzy with anger. I'd never been suicidal, never harmed myself. But David had always been skilled at crafting narratives that cast himself as the reasonable protector and me as the unstable burden. I see. Castellano's voice had cooled several degrees. And the men surrounding my house, also for her protection, insurance that our negotiation proceeds fairly. David leaned forward. Do we have a deal? Castellano was silent for a long moment. Then he pressed a button on his desk phone. Victor, please join us. The door opened moments later, and Victor entered. His massive presence seemed to shrink the room. Without a word, Castellano made a small gesture toward David. Victor stepped forward, extracted a phone from David's jacket pocket despite his protests, and placed it on the desk. Castellano picked it up, studied it briefly, then pressed his thumb against the screen. It unlocked immediately. Your biometric security needs work, he commented mildly, scrolling through the phone. When he found what he was looking for, he turned the screen toward David. Would you care to explain this? From my angle on the security feed, I couldn't see what was displayed. But David's face drained of color. That's not... You don't understand the context. His composure cracked for the first time. It's not what it appears to be. It appears to be, Castellano said coldly, orders for my execution, timed to coincide with your supposed negotiation tonight. He set the phone down with precision. And Emma? What was to become of her once I was eliminated? David's eyes darted to the door, calculating escape routes. Collateral damage. Unfortunate, but necessary. The casual cruelty of his words stole my breath. Not just a pawn in his game, but a sacrifice he'd already written off. Tears burned my eyes, not of sadness, but of incandescent rage. On screen, Castellano's expression finally shifted, a cold, terrible fury transforming his features. He rose slowly from his chair, and even through the security feed, I could feel the lethal intent radiating from him. Mr. Reeves, he said, his voice dangerously soft, I believe our negotiation has concluded. The screens went black, all of them, simultaneously, plunging the panic room into darkness before emergency lighting activated with a soft hum, bathing everything in a dim blue glow. No! I slammed my palm against the control panel. Come back! What was happening upstairs? What had Castellano meant by their negotiation being concluded? The cold fury in his eyes had promised violence. Violence directed at the man who, despite everything, was still legally my husband. I should feel something about that. Fear, perhaps, or moral outrage. Instead, a terrible, clarifying calm settled over me. David had tracked me here, had planned to use me as bait, had deemed me collateral damage. After years of his subtle manipulations and gaslighting, this final betrayal was almost a relief. The mask fully dropped, the monster fully revealed. The sound of the locks disengaging startled me from my thoughts. The door slid open to reveal Victor, his massive frame filling the entrance. Is it over? I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. Mr. Castellano wants to see you. He didn't answer my question directly, but something in his tone had shifted. A new note of respect, perhaps. I followed him through the underground corridors and up a different staircase than the one we'd descended earlier. This one emerged through what appeared to be a pantry into a gleaming industrial kitchen, currently empty of staff. Where's David? I asked as we moved through silent hallways. His men? Victor's expression remained neutral. Being dealt with. The vagueness of his answer sent a chill through me, but I couldn't bring myself to ask for clarification. Some things were better left unknown. He led me to a part of the house I hadn't seen before, a wing that seemed more private, less formal than the study where I'd first met Castellano. The decor here was still elegant but warmer somehow, with artwork on the walls and subtle touches that suggested actual living rather than mere display. Victor stopped before a door of dark wood, knocked once, and opened it without waiting for a response. "Sir, Ms. Reeves." The room beyond was a private office, smaller than the formal study but somehow more imposing. Castellano stood at a window, gazing out at the night. The storm had finally passed, leaving the sky clear and star-filled. He turned as I entered, and I was struck again by the intensity of his presence, like standing too close to a high-voltage line. "Thank you, Victor," he said. The giant nodded and withdrew, closing the door behind him. We regarded each other in silence for a long moment. Castellano had removed his suit jacket, and his white shirt bore a small spatter of what looked terrifyingly like blood on one sleeve. My eyes fixed on it, and he followed my gaze. "Not mine," he said simply. Then, noting my expression, "Not your husband's either. One of his men made a poor decision." Relief shouldn't have been my first emotion, but it was. "Where is David now?" "On his way to meet with federal agents." At my startled look, he added, "I've been building a case against him for months. Tonight merely accelerated the timeline." "Federal agents?" I repeated, struggling to keep up. "You're working with law enforcement?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Not all power operates outside the law, Emma. Sometimes the most effective position is straddling the boundary between worlds." He moved to a sideboard, poured 2 drinks, and extended one to me. I took it automatically, our fingers brushing in a moment of contact that sent an inexplicable current up my arm. "Your husband will be charged with multiple counts of fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, and attempted murder. With the evidence I've provided, along with his communications from tonight, he'll likely die in prison." Castellano's voice was matter-of-fact, without a trace of satisfaction or triumph. "And his men? Those who surrendered will face similar charges. Those who didn't—" He left the sentence unfinished, but his meaning was clear. I should have been horrified. Instead, I felt only a hollow emptiness where fear had been moments before. I took a sip of the drink, whiskey again, burning a path down my throat that matched the fire building in my chest. "He was going to let me die," I said, the reality of it finally hitting me full force. "His own wife. Just collateral damage." "Ex-wife," Castellano corrected quietly, almost. A strangled laugh escaped me at hearing my own mental correction from his lips. "Yes, almost." He studied me with those intense dark eyes. "You're in shock." "Probably." I took another sip, welcoming the burn. "It's not every day you learn your husband is a criminal who planned your murder." "No," he agreed, "though you suspected something was wrong long before tonight. It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. The signs were there. I just interpreted them differently. Thought he was having affairs, or hiding assets for the divorce. Not," I gestured vaguely, "all this. The mind protects itself from truths too painful to process." He moved closer, not touching me, but near enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. "What will you do now?" The question caught me off guard. I hadn't thought beyond survival for the past several hours. "I don't know. Go home, I suppose. Pick up the pieces. The divorce should be simpler now, at least." "Your home may not be safe," he said. "David had allies who won't be pleased by tonight's developments, and while he's in custody, his organization remains partially intact." Fresh fear bloomed in my chest. "Are you saying I'm still in danger?" "I'm saying precautions would be wise." His gaze was steady, assessing. "You knocked on my door tonight, Emma. In some ways, that makes you my responsibility." "I don't need a savior," I said, more sharply than I'd intended. After years with David, the last thing I wanted was another man telling me what to do, how to live, where I belonged. "No," Castellano agreed, surprising me. "You don't. You survived a marriage to a monster with your spirit intact. You're clearly capable." The simple acknowledgement of my strength nearly undid me. After years of David subtly undermining my confidence, having this enigmatic, powerful man recognize my resilience felt like rain on parched earth. "Thank you," I managed. "For tonight. For everything." "Don't thank me yet." Something shifted in his expression, a decision reached. "I have a proposition for you." My guard instantly rose. What kind of proposition? A practical one. He moved to his desk, withdrew a business card, and handed it to me. It bore only a name, Elena Varga, and a phone number. My sister. She manages several of my legitimate business interests, including a foundation that provides safe housing and support for women leaving dangerous situations. I turned the card over in my fingers. I'm not a charity case. No, he agreed. You're an educated woman with valuable skills who happens to need a secure place to stay, and possibly employment that doesn't involve returning to a workplace your husband may have compromised. His eyes held mine. Elena is expanding the foundation's legal team. Your background in corporate law would be an asset. I stared at him, suspicion warring with desperate hope. Why would you do this for a stranger? Because you're not entirely a stranger anymore. His voice softened almost imperceptibly. And because I've seen too many lives destroyed by men like David Reeves. There was history there, personal history that shadowed his eyes for just a moment before he blinked it away. I don't know, I said honestly. This is overwhelming. Of course. He stepped back, giving me space both physically and metaphorically. The offer stands regardless of your decision. Take tonight to rest. Tomorrow will bring enough challenges of its own. I nodded, suddenly aware of how bone-deep exhausted I was. The adrenaline that had kept me functioning was fading, leaving leaden limbs and a mind growing increasingly foggy. Castellano must have noticed, because he moved toward the door. I've had a guest room prepared. Victor will show you. There are clothes that should fit well enough for sleeping, and toiletries in the attached bathroom. Thank you. I hesitated. But I should probably go. My apartment is being watched by David's associates as we speak. His tone brooked no argument. Stay tonight. In the morning, when security has vetted the situation, Victor will escort you wherever you wish to go. The thought of returning to my empty apartment, potentially stalked by David's criminal associates, made my skin crawl. But staying here, in this enigmatic man's home, carried its own set of unknowns. You've had quite enough of men making decisions for you, Castellano said, reading my hesitation accurately. So I'll be clear. This isn't an order or even strong advice. It's an offer of safe harbor for tonight, nothing more. Put that way, as a choice rather than a command, the decision became easier. Then I accept. Thank you. He nodded once and opened the door. Victor materialized immediately, as if he'd been waiting just outside. With a final glance at Castellano, his face once again an unreadable mask. I followed the giant through more corridors until we reached a guest suite that would have put most luxury hotels to shame. There's a security panel by the bed, Victor said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Press the red button if you need anything during the night. He hesitated, then added, You're safe here, Ms. Reeves. After he left, I stood in the center of the elegant room, trying to process everything that had happened since I knocked on a stranger's door just hours ago. My entire reality had shifted on its axis. My husband was a criminal now in federal custody. I had been tracked, used as bait, written off as collateral damage, and I had found unexpected sanctuary with a man who straddled worlds of power I barely understood. I moved to the bathroom, where I found new toiletries arranged neatly on marble countertops and plush towels warming on a heated rack. The shower beckoned, promising to wash away the lingering chill and terror of the night. As hot water sluiced over me, washing away the last physical traces of my ordeal, I leaned against the tile wall and finally allowed myself to cry. Not from fear or grief, but from overwhelming relief. For the first time in years, the weight of David's presence had lifted from my life. Despite the dangers still lurking, despite the uncertainty of my future, I felt strangely, powerfully free. Later, wrapped in a borrowed silk robe, I stood at the window of the guest room, gazing out at city lights twinkling beneath a clearing sky. Dawn was still hours away, but I could sense its promise on the horizon. A new day, a new beginning. The business card Castellano had given me sat on the nightstand. I picked it up, running my fingers over the embossed letters. A job with his foundation's legal team. Safe housing. A fresh start. It seemed too perfect, too convenient. What did he really want? Men like Castellano, powerful, dangerous, complex, rarely offered something for nothing. Yet when he looked at me, I didn't see calculation or desire in his eyes. I saw recognition, as if he somehow knew me, understood me in ways even David never had. I slipped into the luxurious bed, the business card still clutched in my hand. Tomorrow, I would face the wreckage of my old life and the uncertain promise of something new. Tomorrow, I would make decisions with clear eyes and a clear head, but tonight, in the strange sanctuary of a dangerous man's home, I allowed myself to simply rest, deeply, dreamlessly, for the first time in longer than I could remember. Morning arrived with gentle insistence, sunlight filtering through gauzy curtains, the distant sounds of a household coming to life. For a moment, caught in the hazy space between sleep and wakefulness, I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came flooding back. The storm, the wrong door, Castellano, David's betrayal. I sat up, disoriented but clear-headed. The guest room looked different in daylight, less intimidating, more welcoming with its cream walls and soft blue accents. On a chair near the door, I spotted neatly folded clothing that hadn't been there the night before. Dark jeans, a simple gray sweater, undergarments still with store tags attached, all approximately my size. A soft knock at the door preceded a woman's voice, warm, with the faintest trace of an accent. "Ms. Reeves? I've brought breakfast if you're awake." "Yes, come in," I called, tightening the sash of my borrowed robe. The door opened to reveal a woman in her mid-50s with salt and pepper hair pulled into a neat bun. She carried a tray laden with coffee, fruit, and what smelled gloriously like freshly baked pastries. "Good morning," she said with a gentle smile. "I'm Rosa. Mr. Castellano asked me to make sure you had everything you needed." She set the tray on a small table near the window. "The clothing should fit, but if anything is unsuitable, please let me know." "Thank you," I said, somewhat overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness. "This is very kind." Rosa's smile deepened, crinkling the corners of her eyes. "Mr. Castellano said to tell you he's had to step out on business, but would like to speak with you when he returns, if that's convenient." She moved toward the door. "Take your time. No one will disturb you." After she left, I approached the breakfast tray with growing awareness of my hunger. I hadn't eaten since a hasty sandwich at my desk yesterday afternoon. The coffee was perfect, strong and aromatic, and the pastries still warm from the oven. As I ate, I tried to make sense of my situation. David was in federal custody. Our marriage was effectively over. My home might not be safe. My career, at a law firm with close ties to David's financial business, was likely compromised. In the space of one night, the careful life I'd constructed had been obliterated. And yet, I felt strangely light, as if shackles I'd worn for so long I'd forgotten their weight had suddenly fallen away. After breakfast, I showered again and dressed in the provided clothes, which fit surprisingly well. I was just running a borrowed brush through my hair when another knock came at the door. This time it was Victor. "Ms. Reeves, if you're ready, Mr. Castellano has returned." I followed him through the house, noticing details I'd missed the night before. In daylight, Castellano's home revealed itself as a study in tasteful opulence, antiques mingling with modern pieces, original artwork adorning walls, everything of obvious quality, but without ostentation. The home of a man with money, but also, surprisingly, taste and restraint. Victor led me to a sunroom at the back of the house, a space filled with light and overlooking a private garden just beginning to show signs of spring. Castellano stood with his back to the door, speaking quietly on a phone. He wore casual clothes today, dark trousers and a charcoal sweater that did nothing to diminish the aura of authority surrounding him. He turned as we entered, ending his call with a brief, "It's done." To me, he said, "Emma, I trust you slept well?" "Yes, thank you." I remained near the doorway, suddenly uncertain how to interact with this man who had saved my life just hours ago. "Please, sit." He gestured to a comfortable seating area surrounded by lush plants. As I settled onto a sofa, he asked Victor, "The perimeter." "Secure," the giant replied. "Ms. Reeves's apartment has been under surveillance since dawn. 2 men watching the entrance. They appear to be waiting." My heart sank. So David's associates were indeed looking for me. Castellano nodded as if this confirmed his expectations. "Have Elena's people prepare the safe house on Marlborough, and arrange for Ms. Reeves's essential belongings to be retrieved." I can get my own things, I protested. At considerable risk, Castellano countered, taking a seat opposite me. David's organization is in disarray, which makes it unpredictable. They don't know exactly what happened last night, but they know he was coming to see me, and they know you were here. That makes you a loose end. The clinical assessment sent a chill through me. For how long? Until the federal case is fully processed. Weeks, possibly months. His dark eyes studied my face. Have you considered my offer? The business card was still in my possession, tucked into the pocket of the borrowed jeans. I've been a bit preoccupied with the revelation that my husband is a criminal who wanted me dead, I said dryly. Unexpectedly, Castellano smiled, a brief flash that transformed his severe features and revealed a glimpse of something warmer beneath the controlled exterior. Fair enough. Why are you helping me? The question had been circling in my mind all night. The truth this time. He considered me for a long moment, seeming to weigh how much to reveal. I told you last night that I've been building a case against your husband for months. What I didn't explain was why. The $7 million he stole from you? That was merely the catalyst. Castellano leaned forward slightly. David Reeves laundered money for several criminal organizations, including rivals of mine, but he also worked with legitimate businesses, law firms, real estate developers, tech startups. He moved in multiple worlds, much as I do. The difference is that he preyed on innocent people along the way. His expression darkened. 3 months ago, one of those people was a young woman named Sofia Martinez, 26 years old, worked as an accountant at a firm that handled some of David's legitimate business. She noticed discrepancies, raised concerns to her superiors. A week later, her car went off the road in a rainstorm. Police called it an accident. But you don't think it was, I said quietly. Cold realization dawning. I know it wasn't. His voice had hardened. Sophia was my cousin's daughter. Family, and the pieces clicked into place. So this is about revenge, justice, he corrected. I've been dismantling David's operation piece by piece, building a federal case that would ensure he never hurt anyone again. Last night accelerated that timeline, but the end result is the same. And me? Where do I fit in this justice? I asked, needing to understand my place in his calculations. You don't. His direct gaze held mine. You're a complication I didn't anticipate. But you're also someone who deserves protection after being used as a pawn in games you didn't know were being played around you. There was honesty in his words, a lack of pretense that I found strangely reassuring after years of David's subtle manipulations. The job offer? The safe house? That's really just about protection? I pressed, still skeptical. The protection is necessary, he said pragmatically. The job offer is genuine because my sister needs someone with your expertise, and because meaningful work is the best remedy for trauma. A shadow passed over his face. I've seen what happens when survivors are treated as fragile victims, rather than capable people who endured something terrible. Again, I sensed personal history behind his words, experiences that had shaped his understanding of trauma and recovery. I don't know you, I said slowly. You're a stranger who lives in a fortified house, carries a gun, and has men who follow his orders without question. By most definitions, you're dangerous. Yes. He didn't deny it, or try to soften the truth. But David was supposed to be safe, respectable, a successful financier with the right connections and the right pedigree. I laughed without humor. And he was a monster hiding in plain sight. Appearances can be deceiving in both directions, Castellano agreed. I won't pretend to be something I'm not. I operate in gray areas. I've done things I'm not proud of, but I have lines I don't cross, and protecting the innocent is one of them. His honesty was refreshing after years of David's smooth lies. This man might be dangerous, but at least he was direct about it. If I accept your sister's offer, I said carefully, what strings are attached? None, he replied simply. The foundation is legitimate. Elena runs it independently. Your connection to me would be known only to her and a few trusted others. You would be free to leave at any time, should you choose. It sounded too good to be true, and yet, you'd be my benefactor, my protector. Something flickered in his dark eyes. A hint of frustration, perhaps, at my continued suspicion, only until the threat has passed. After that, our paths need never cross again, if that's your preference. The thought of never seeing him again after this strange interlude sparked an unexpected pang that I quickly suppressed. This was about survival, not whatever that feeling had been. "I need time to think," I said finally. "This is all overwhelming." "Of course." He stood, signaling the end of our conversation. "The safe house will be ready by this afternoon. You're welcome to stay there while you consider your options, regardless of your decision about the foundation." I rose as well, suddenly aware of how close we were standing in the sunlit room. "Thank you. For everything." He studied my face for a moment, then said quietly, "You knocked on the wrong door last night, Emma Reeves, but perhaps it was exactly where you needed to be." The words lingered between us, laden with meanings neither of us was ready to explore. Then Victor appeared in the doorway, breaking the moment. "Sir, the arrangements are complete." Castellano nodded. "Good. And Ms. Reeves's apartment? Our team is extracting her essentials now. They'll be delivered to the safe house by 3. I should have felt violated by this invasion of my privacy, but instead, I felt only relief that I wouldn't have to return to the apartment I'd shared with David, now forever tainted by the knowledge of his true nature. "What happens now?" I asked, unsure of the next steps in this strange new reality. "Now you begin again," Castellano said simply, free from David's influence, free to make your own choices. Freedom. Such a simple word for such a complex concept. After years of David's escalating control, the absence of constraints felt both exhilarating and terrifying. 6 hours later, I stood in a sunlit apartment on Marlborough Street, the safe house that was more luxurious than any place I'd lived before. My essential belongings had indeed been delivered. Clothing, personal items, even the framed photo of my parents that had sat on my bedside table. The refrigerator was stocked, the security system state-of-the-art. On the kitchen counter sat a sealed envelope with my name written in bold, masculine script. Inside was a brief note: "The choice is yours. AC." Beneath it, a new phone with Elena Varga's number programmed as the only contact. I moved to the window, gazing out at the city, my city, now transformed by everything I'd learned. Somewhere out there, David sat in a federal holding cell. Somewhere, Castellano continued his complex dance between worlds of power. And here I stood, at the intersection of endings and beginnings. My hand closed around the phone. Perhaps I would call Elena tomorrow, or perhaps I would forge my own path entirely. For the first time in years, the choice was truly mine. I had knocked on the wrong door in a storm, never imagining it would lead me here, not just to physical safety, but to an unexpected liberation. As I watched the setting sun paint the city in hues of gold and amber, I felt something stirring within me that I hadn't experienced in far too long. Hope.